We only have Corporation Counsel Robin Edwards here till 6:15, and time is pinching me. So I was hoping to have David here so he wouldn't miss any of the conversation. And but I think we're just going to call this meeting in order. It's 5:40. My name is Joe Cabo. I'm the chairperson of this committee. With me on this committee, I have Councilman Seabury, Councilman Sadi, Councilman Knapp, and Councilman Visconti. We also have with us tonight our Director of Planning, Dennis Elpern, our Deputy Director of Planning, Sharon Filippo. We have ex officio members from the Council, Mr. Chianese, Mr. Rotello, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Taylor, and we have Mrs. D'Amici hiding back there. And if Jack wasn't blocking you, Donnie was. At this time, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting is a continuation of a meeting from August 23rd, I believe it is. We had, at that time, asked Corporation Counsel to take a charge from the committee regarding an ordinance change, and we also had requested that zoning also take a look into a change in the regulations and then come back and report to this committee, and that's why we're here tonight. So at this time, I'd like to ask Robin Edwards from Corporation Counsel's office if she would brief us as a committee on where we are in an ordinance change and what the possible language changes are, and then we can get into our discussion from there. I'll go to Mr. Elpern and Ms. Filippo after you. So.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Cabo. Good evening, everyone. Simply consistent with the charge of the committee, after the last meeting, which occurred on August 23rd, we've met with various city officials, discussed the request of the committee, and have returned with draft ordinances, which you have before you. I can simply run through them and explain them to you. You have section 1614 before you, and that is the ordinance, our ordinance that discusses the septic treatment rules, regulations, and fees. And the change which we have made to 1614 is a simple change, and it really clarifies that which is there already. And what this change does now is it makes it clear that any hauler, septic hauler, who wishes to dispose of septic within Danbury and has a duly authorized permit is authorized, and we have added required, to dispose of the materials at the Danbury sewage treatment facility. So that is the first change that we made in the ordinances, consistent with the committee's request. And the second change is a round of changes that we made really just works in concert with this change. What we did was we also went into the definitions section, which is section 16.1 of our Code of Ordinances, and we have just tightened up our definitions a little bit, or further clarified again that which already exists, and they're fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just run through them. There's section 16.1, subsection 2. We have added a sentence which really further just clarifies the definition of sewage, to also add that sewage also means sludge or effluent produced from any subsurface sewage disposal system. That just tightens up our definitions a little bit. And the other recommended changes in section 16, parentheses 10, 16.1, parentheses 10. And what that does is that just changes our definition of sewage works. It just really modifies that which exists already, and it makes it consistent with the definition that is now being proposed in the zoning regulations, consistent with the first charge of this committee. So those definitions are parallel, and basically it provides that a sewage work is all municipal facilities owned or operated by the city of Danbury for the purpose of collecting, pumping, treating, and disposing of sewage. And the last one is really as a housekeeping matter. It's in section 15. It refers to the common council. I changed it to city council. And actually I see in section 16, I see another common council, which I can also change to city council. That's not on your draft. Those are the ordinance changes that we worked through after our research and discussion with various city officials. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have or elaborate on anything at this point.
Okay. You know, if it's okay with the committee, I'll open the floor to questions Mrs. Edwards, and then we can go to Mr. Alpern and planning and see what's happening on that end. Does anybody from the committee have any questions? Mr. Visconti?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Corporation Council, under section 1614, subsection D, the permit procedures,
Yes.
where you have put in that the haulers would have to, if they wish to go to the Danbury septic system, that they would now be required to have a permit. Is there going to be a charge for the permit?
They always have been required to have a permit anyway, and I believe that I believe it's $100.
Mr. Day, right now, we can refer that right to him.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, David.
Actually, there's a chair there.
Mr. Day, thank you.
Slide that back.
We appreciate you coming, and we have a question as soon as you get seated for you.
Mr. Visconti, yes, it is. It's what I'm right. It's $100, and that is in
Yearly?
Yes, $100 annually. Yes.
And that's been in place. That's not something that's...
That's
Right,
kind of
that's been in place.
yeah, that's kind of
If a hauler refuses to do this, and is there an alternative for them to go to another sewage
I
disposal?
believe there is. And
Yes, that's
there
just,
is
if
always
they
plan
wish
for
to
that.
dispose of it in Danbury, they have to go to the Danbury Municipal Treatment Plant. But if they are, hauling a load and they're closer to some other plant and they also have a permit there, they're free to go there if they wish to.
Nothing, as far as I understand, nothing is binding them. They have to come to Danbury with the
No.
septic.
No, it's not. Only if they wish to dispose of it in Danbury, they have to go to the Danbury Sewage Treatment Facility.
Okay.
I don't know who to ask this, I guess David, is there another area where they could go to besides Danbury?
Well, there are other wastewater treatment plants that do have, septic.
In this area?
Municipal one.
Municipal, yeah. Kent, Connecticut, they're very small, but I mean, if somebody's working up in that area, they could go up there.
Through the chair, if I may
Sure.
follow. David, have you heard or talked to any of the haulers or gotten any kind of an idea of how they may want to go with this deal, to stay in this area or in Danbury or go to other areas?
I haven't specifically spoken to any haulers, no.
Okay. Mr. Seabury?
Thank you,
And
Mr.
then we'll go
Chairman.
to Mr. Shelby.
David, for you, please. Approximately, or maybe specifically if you know that, how many haulers are there that come to Danbury?
I'd say there's approximately 20 active haulers. We usually, just because they have a permit to dump here, doesn't mean they always use that permit to dump here. It depends what area they're working in.
And follow up,
Please.
what's the charge when they go there?
Right now, it's $76 per 1,000 gallons for in-region. And before my time, the ordinance was revised so that out-of-region is 150% of that $76. So it's probably $114. Out-of-region would be New York. There's a group of towns that didn't participate in the original building of the septic treatment facility. So those would be the out-of-region towns.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Shelby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the Chair to the Corporation Council. Looking at Section 16-14 permit procedures, the new language and require, which makes sense. The question I have is with regard to the term Danbury Sewage Treatment Facility.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a defined term anywhere? Not sewage works, but is that terminology in and of itself a defined term anywhere in the ordinance? I couldn't find it.
No, it is not. That term is not specifically defined. Sewage works, as you just mentioned,
Right.
is defined to include the Danbury Municipal Facility.
Okay.
For the municipal facility. We can just quickly look at it. Let me just pull it up for you. The sewage works is all municipal facilities owned or operated by the city of Danbury.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that in the final draft that goes to the council, and we can talk maybe just offline on wordsmithing,
Sure.
that when you use what seems to be defined term Danbury Sewage Treatment Facility, particularly when you capitalize it, it points to a particular operation.
Yes.
Having sewage works defined is broader than just this one particular operation. And they're two different sets of terms. One says sewage works, one says Danbury Sewage Treatment Facility. if sewage works was to include the Danbury sewage treatment facility, or if there was a definition of Danbury sewage treatment facility that said that also included sewage works. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're just using different terminology. I
You
don't want-
could simply add a parenthetical in here and say, as you just said, including the Danbury sewage treatment facility, because there could
So someone can't
potentially-
argue that that is something different than a municipal. What if somebody went and put up a sign?
They
We are
put it right
the
above your
Danbury
eyes.
sewage treatment facility. But I'm saying, I've seen those types of things happen, particularly.
Sure.
So the only thing was just to add that in before, and that wouldn't slow this down at all, because we still have time before the regular council meeting.
Sure, oh, sure, I'm happy to work on that.
Good point, Mr. Simon, thank you.
The other issue is, just very generally, from the last committee meeting and what the council approved, planning clearly is proceeding within the parameters that it can. And I don't think we should go into that in undue detail or undue influence. There's a process now that has to be followed. I understand that there is now an application and an amendment that's been proposed, and that has to follow its normal course. We cannot influence that. The ordinance changes before us. The issue of fees, I mean, what this seems to do is address the concern of the committee and of the council. It doesn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Day or Corporation Counsel, Mr. Chairman, this doesn't increase the current permit fee. This doesn't increase the current fees per gallon to dump at the Danbury facility. This doesn't increase or impose any new regulatory schemes or requirements upon haulers. Is that all correct, through the chair?
Yes.
That's correct. But, so we do all these things with no new costs, no new fees, no new regulations, but we address a concern that's been brought to this council, and I think that's a win for the city and for its residents. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Mr. Knapp?
Just a quick question to David. Back to what Greg was talking about earlier. What percentage of in-area as opposed to out-of-area business do you feel we control at this point? In other words, is it 80%, 90% out of town, 80%, 90% in town?
I could get you those numbers. I'd say, the vast majority is in region.
It is.
Yes.
And region is strictly Danbury and surrounding towns?
Danbury and about 5 or 6 surrounding towns, yeah. We do have some people that come over from New York, but I mean, I'd have to do a breakdown for that, but I just, the majority.
Yeah, my concern was that we have more in-area use than out-of-area use.
Correct.
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rattel?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair to Robin Edwards. Corporation Counsel, even to the floor. Councilman Saudi brought up a good point about parsing language, about how we try to draft these things and we try to include as much language as we possibly can so that down the road some Sharpie doesn't get their hands on it and figure out a backdoor into this. And I was wondering if maybe what we could do is also include a clause that would say something like, anytime there was a proposal that materially affected the sewage processing system, it would need the permission of the council or of planning or of a department, the water department, the sewer department. That way, regardless of what they came up with, if the city were to decide that this would have some sort of substantial impact, before they were allowed to proceed, they would at least need permission from the city. I'm sure that's a breakable clause in court, but it would at least give us some time to avoid perhaps what we almost didn't avoid during a recent issue. So no matter how we parse the language and how they parse the language, there's still this umbrella thing. Look, we don't know what you guys are doing, and you're really creative with your language, but still this is going to have some impact on the system. And since it does, we already have a regulation in place that says you need our permission to do that. That's all I have. Thanks.
Well, one of the things that I would say is when I talked with the Corporation Counsel about the change to the ordinance, I was really happy that it was basically 2 words that fixed this, and without becoming too wordy and wind up working us into something else either. So I understand what you're saying, Mr. Rattal, and I would just ask the Corporation Counsel to chime in on their feeling on that. And
Well, my initial thoughts, Mr. Rattel, are it's always, you have to specify things with particularity, and that strikes me as being a little bit overbroad, materially impacting the sewage processing system. I'm not sure where we would go with that. I mean, you might run into some challenges to that language, as you just so correctly pointed out, I think, in your introduction of such points.
That would almost
I'm
be the
not
point.
sure where. I'm not sure where we would go with that, how we would be able to integrate something like that into the system. I mean, we will have some safeguards in effect. I mean, we will, if the zoning commission does what we think it will do, there will be, the definitions will be changed, and there will be a municipal sewage treatment plant will be the permitted use in that zone, and that's it. So I think maybe we could address that at a later time if you think that it doesn't accomplish what you intended to accomplish, but I think at this point it's probably prudent to move forthwith with the suggested amendments on the table.
Mr. Sadi?
I think Mr. Rotello's point is very well taken, that there could be something we're not contemplating down the road that seriously impacts our infrastructure's ability to handle it. I think that goes beyond, in a good way, the charge of the committee, but I think what should come out of this is that maybe have Corporation Council or another committee specifically look at that issue, because my gut is, from some research I've done, is that we may run into statutory issues as to what we can as a city do from the standpoint of allowing hookup or connection to certain infrastructure. If they already comply with everything else, can we then set up a scheme where we say, well, you are a significant impact? Well, again, what does that mean? We'll have to define that. We may run into statute. If this committee had a lot of time, I think what we want to do is get this part of it done, but not lose what you just brought up. So I think a lot of the committee members would wholeheartedly support something like that, but if we could move this aspect to the floor the next meeting, and as, I guess, sort of a I don't know, sort of dicta in our motion or decision here tonight, have Corporation Council sort of start to look into that, so they can work with, you know, Councilman Rotello and others in moving something like that forward.
We'd be happy to continue to work with you on these
Okay.
important matters.
Good.
Mr. Alpern, Ms. Cledro, without compromising, where zoning is, or as Mr. Sadi mentioned, us having undue influence on zoning, would you just give the council, the committee, just a rundown of what your department's doing and how you're looking at this, and just a timeline or an approximate timeline?
Well, we prepared regulations and amendments. I want to make it clear at the very beginning that it's not directed toward any individual or property owner. This obviously would apply citywide. They're intended to define sewage treatment facilities, because they're not defined at the present time, but to define them in a manner that's consistent with the intent of the Code of Ordinances, so that we don't have a conflict there, and to establish minimum lot size for such uses. I think you've all gotten copies of the proposal. It will be going forward to the Zoning Commission, and my suspicion is that they will hear it at the next meeting. But if we follow their past practices, it's probably, one can assume that there's a greater chance that they will put off acting until the following meeting in October. That's not to say they can't act at the next meeting, but that's just been my experience.
Okay, great. Thank you. David, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Mr. Sadi?
Mr. Chairman, at this time I'd like to place a motion on the floor and move that this committee recommend to the council as a whole passage of the ordinance as drafted with the edits to the definition section as discussed during this committee meeting.
Okay, under discussion for the committee. Anybody have anything else you want to add? Okay, great. Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion passes unanimously. Seeing no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Seabury, seconded by Mr. Visconti. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. I don't know if anyone from the mayor's office will be here tonight.
Okay.
I'll fill in.
That works well, Lord.
Okay, well, someone from the mayor's office comes, we will certainly welcome them in. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Councilman Taylor. We're calling the meeting to order at 6:17. We're meeting in the third floor, the council caucus chamber, City Hall, 155 Deer Hill Avenue, Danbury, Connecticut. As I said, I'm the chairman of this committee, Councilman Taylor. Also on the committee is Councilman Nero and Councilman Cavo. We also have present Corporation Counsel Les Pinter, Director of Planning Dennis Alpern. We have ex officio members of the council. We have Councilman Shanice and Vitello, Perkins, D'Amici, and Knapp. We also have Tom Devine from City Center. And I believe the church, we also have Andrea Gardner,
Yes, sorry about that.
Director of City Center, joined us. Thank you. I think the charge of this committee is to consider the request from City Center to retain legal counsel in the matter of expanding the District Number 2 and the approval of the ordinance to amend the map to include H14-356 at Kennedy Avenue into the Danbury Special Services District. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Andrea and have her just give us an overview of what she's looking to do, and then we will have some discussion.
Okay, sure. Also, Tom Devine, our chairman of the City
Yep,
Center.
I already recognize Tom.
This came about as a matter of the bringing together the property that is known as Kennedy Place, which is owned by BRT Realty, and is slated to eventually be developed. And it was a suggestion of the property owner to put the parcel as part of City Center. So I think from his perspective that that it could have the benefits of what City Center has to offer as far as awareness of things that are happening downtown, and also as a way of helping to facilitate adding more to City Center's bottom line.
Tom, you have anything to add?
Well, it's as Andrea explained, it's a simple process of one property owner volunteering their property to go into the district. The City Center does a lot to help keep the downtown alive and the lights on down there. I'm sure most of you are aware of the efforts that we go through on a daily basis between street maintenance, promotions, events, organization, our push for economic development, hence the position being hired for economic development and the formation of the Danbury Main Street Partnership which Dennis spearheaded. So to have that property included in the district means that it benefits from the services as well. So it's money well spent. We operate on a shoestring budget. I think our cash operating budget is how much per year?
From the
taxes.
From the taxes is about $210,000.
$210,000, and we leverage that and almost another $150,000 on top of that through dues that we collect from businesses downtown, or donations, or advertising, or different events that we do to try and keep the downtown alive. So the thing to do is, we all know that downtown needs to move forward at this point in time. I don't think there's anybody in the room that disagrees with that. The tough part is, if City Center hadn't been here all these years, where would we be at this point in time in relation to where we are now? We'd be a few steps back. So
Well, I can certainly attest to that. I've worked with City Center for a long time when we first established the first farmers market, how far things have come in downtown, and I would just like to express the feeling, my own feeling, and I'm sure everyone else's here, of the fine job that's been done by City Center to, to promote downtown Danbury. At this point, I'd like to ask Mr. Alprin if he has any input, any comments, questions?
Well, I also want to mention that Kennedy Place was offered as a site for a fair, carnival this year, and that's certainly a sign of good intent and commitment to downtown. The Main Street Task Force developed a downtown revitalization zone. The boundaries are a little different than those of City Center, but this property is within that revitalization zone. So I think it helps us to better coordinate the efforts of both by including it within City Center boundaries. Do you happen to know how much additional revenue you would gain from this, and any estimates?
It depends on what the mill rate is set, and that's approved during the annual property owners meeting based on a budget that's established. If it's under the current mill rate, it would be about $17,000.
So that's another consideration because
$17,000 annually.
they are not flush with funds, and any amount helps. So I certainly don't have any objection to it.
Mr. Pinter, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would say is that Andrea and I had some contact early on with respect to the procedure. The Common Council in 1987 has adopted the ordinance creating the Danbury Special Services District. It's been around since 1987, therefore. This is the first time I recall where there was a request to expand the district. And the procedure is relatively, as I indicated to Andrea, after having reviewed this, the procedure is relatively straightforward. The ordinance specifies a schedule, a property description essentially in the ordinance itself, which describes the parameters of boundary of the district. What the council would have to do would be to authorize the expansion of that district, thereby amending that Schedule A, and I've recommended, and you see the motion that's there, I've recommended that the Schedule A be actually appended to the ordinance when the ordinance is redrafted, because the Schedule A was difficult to get. I think Andrea finally did get it.
Yeah, we did it. We had it, a surveyor had done it.
Great. So that would be amended if the council approved it. That would be, and that would allow the expansion of the district by virtue of the adoption of that amended schedule. What that would mean, as indicated in correspondence that Andrea had also prepared, would allow the additional revenue, which is permissible. The district does have its own independent authority to do things, to contract, to sue, be sued, and all those other things that a separate district does have. We also discussed, and I don't think it would be very expensive, we also discussed, and it's again in the motion, that the council authorized the district to retain counsel for the limited purpose of doing this expansion. And the reason for suggesting retaining counsel is because the district is a separate corporate entity, and therefore we do want to have somewhat of a flexible wall, if you will, between the city's interests and the district's interests, although there's nothing adverse here. But it makes sense, since the formation of the district was with the help of separate counsel, that the same occur here, where there's essentially a redistricting, if you will. Not exactly, but more or less. So, in essence, that would be, the procedures are as I described. The amending of the ordinance simply to amend the Schedule A. That's the only amendment to the ordinance that you have to get this job done.
Thank you. Members of the committee, questions? Mr. Cabo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Pinter or to Ms. Gardner or Mr. Devine. Term of participation, once this property, if this property gets entered into the Special Services District, can they opt out? Do they have the ability to opt out at any time, or that was one part of my question?
No, not unless the district is dissolved. No.
Okay, so once they're in, they're in. And my second question, if I may proceed,
Yes, sir.
is if the property transfers, this is actually a deed change, so this gets, the Special Services District gets transferred along with the deed of the property if they were to sell and change owners.
Yes, the property would stay within the district
Okay.
unless there's an action as Tom describes.
Mr. Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spoken at ad hoc meetings and council meetings before on quality anchor projects downtown, and one of them that I see unfolding is the one on Belton Street, and I'm hopeful that will be one of the preeminent anchor projects. And I continue to see this particular parcel of land as being one on the other end of the street, and hoping that it will fill in somehow. So I'm grateful to Mr. Bertram for wanting to do that. The only thing that I'm a little bit, I won't say uncomfortable with, but that I'm thinking about is, I read in here somewhere that it would be about $18,000 in taxes to Mr. Bertram. I don't know if that number is 100% correct. So I guess my question then, through you, Mr. Chairman, is that might be to Andrea, I'm not sure. What are like 4 or 5 benefits? I mean, if I were a person down there, why would I want to be part of this, I guess? So that's my question. So if either to Mr. Devine or
That's kind of an easy question to answer.
Thanks.
Because we all, as you know, I own several properties in the downtown, and as property owners, we all want to take ownership of the direction of the downtown. And obviously, the reason the district was formed is, in the beginning, was because people weren't pleased with the direction of the downtown and the level of attention was being paid to. So it's sort of nice to have a watchdog organization out there that also takes responsibility. I mean, we got a guy out there sweeping the streets every day because, the city can't physically get to that nor afford to do that. So we also supplement a lot of the city services that you see out there. The promotions and special events draw people into the downtown. When you draw people into the downtown, there's an economic benefit there, and people looking around and going, wow, this is really an active area. So it may encourage other people in the course of time to invest in the downtown, which means everybody's property values can rise at some point. Because if you look at downtown in comparison to, Federal Road or Mill Plain Road, and you compare property values, there's a drastic difference. If you look at rent values in the downtown and you compare that to outlying areas, you can see there's a tremendous difference as well.
If I could add something too, one of the challenges of development in downtown is that you have a lot of different property owners. Currently, we have about 165 different property owners in the downtown. So unlike trying to move forward with economic development, if you say you have a shopping center or an area that's being developed that might have a single owner or a syndicate of parties together, you don't have 165 people, trying to make a decision about something. And to be part of a singular body that's sort of with the interest, whose interest is to provide promotion, organization, design, and economic restructuring for that given area is a benefit.
just to follow up with that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate both of those answers, but it's just not perfectly clear to me as to why I would want to go into that, because if I'm there, if I own that property, I'm going to benefit from some of those things that I've heard about promoting downtown. Whether I own that, whether I'm part of that district or not, I'm thinking. So it's still not 100% clear to me, like, well, why should I get into this if it's going to cost me? I mean, let me rephrase the question, I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Would it cost me more or less in taxes? Maybe that might be the way to frame it, if I was part of that district. Let me put it that way, if I may. Thank you. Thank you.
I can answer that. It's costing more to be part of the district because the taxes, the city center taxes are an additional overlay to the regular property taxes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Knapp?
Couple of questions. The number that was floating around, the $17,000 or $18,000, is when you base your contribution to the city center, is that based on size of land? Is that based on value of property? I'm thinking that if this moves forward, when it develops into whatever it develops into, and I don't think anybody really knows at this point what it's going to develop into, as that goes up in value, do these taxes also raise? Are we looking at a possibility of that $18,000 becoming $80,000 today, or is it going to be $18,000 and then incremental changes as the district changes?
The taxes are based on the value of the property. So
Okay.
to answer your question, yes, they can go up.
Okay.
In relation to what it means in terms of to a property owner, like I'll use, I own a firehouse on Ive Street, so my annual property taxes are around $11,000, $12,000 a year. On top of that, I pay maybe $1,200 or $1,500 in city center taxes. So it's a drastic difference between the two. If the property is developed and it does get to that point where the values go up, and let's say that they put up, 100 units there or 200 units there, or how many ever the plan to put there, the pie is also, even if the value is increased, the pie is getting divided by more and more individuals at that point in time. So city center taxes are never really a real, any tax is an ouch factor, don't get me wrong. But city center taxes aren't a big ouch factor. When I see my water and sewer bill, that's a big ouch factor. A city center tax, I look at it and it's something that you can usually handle that type of thing.
And if I could also add, it doesn't necessarily have to go up with the increase of the...
Stop, please.
It doesn't also necessarily have to increase the amount of taxes that are paid, even if the property values go up, because the mill rate is backed out. There's the total assessment of the property, then there's the budget that's going to be set by city center property owners, and then that budget is backed into the assessment to come up with a mill rate. So if the budget were never to increase, and yet we expanded our district, in theory, the taxes would go down to each property owner.
Because our mill rate does go up and down.
It fluctuates.
And in order for us to increase our budget, it has to have a majority vote by 165 property owners downtown. So you can imagine it's very difficult to get that to go up.
Although we've been incrementally increasing it over the years.
2%, 3%, type thing.
If I could just follow
Yes,
up
sir.
one more question. The changes that were made in Main Street over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, or 5 or 6, however many it was, where they widened the sidewalks, redid the sidewalks, put up some nice posts, did a lot of renovating in Little Main Street. Was that done through City Center?
20
years.
Yeah, 20 years, okay. Well,
No, it's not that.
we can live here, the time just flies.
You're only
Was that
20
City Center dollars, or was that, obviously it was taxpayer dollars, but was it driven by City Center, or was that driven by the city itself?
That was done by the Department of Planning itself.
Okay. Because my concern is that we make them,
Development agency.
make this property part of City Center. Now, what kind of modifications are we going to have to do to the roads? We're not going to cut any trees down. But what kind of modifications are we going to do to the roads?
That would be
in order to-
something that the city would have to decide, and that would come before you
Okay.
through the city council to make a determination. There were a number of monies that were sources for the total redevelopment that took place in the early 90s. $8 million came from the state. We threw in some CDBG money as well, like the green. The green was paid for entirely by CDBG money. But most of it was state money.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Cobham?
I'm going to try to just make a statement, and maybe with a question, just verification, so we understand. It might help Mr. Nero understand, because I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Nero, on that, but I think what this benefits Mr. Bertram and his company is it gives him a voice in downtown. It gives him a direction of saying, yes, I want to do this as a group with the group, or no, the group doesn't want to do this with downtown, and that affects his bottom line with his buildings and his business. And sponsored city center events help him with his Brewers Bagels, helps him with his Papa John's, helps him with the dance studio that he has there, because it brings people downtown. So that, I think that's part of the benefit for him. I think that over that large parcel of land, because the dollar amount seems great at $17,000 as his tax in the district, you know, he's probably looking at the offset of what he gets at his companies that he's also built downtown. So it's probably, that's his benefit, and I think that's what he's looking at. And, you know, I would totally understand that. It gives him a voice, and it gives him a say in the direction of downtown with the downtown district. And
Probably a better question to ask Dan Bertram.
Yeah.
I'm just presuming.
Right. But for that, he only gets one vote.
Right, no, absolutely.
No, that's what I wanted to point out too. It's
No,
not,
but it gives him a
it's one
voice.
property
Right
owner,
now,
one vote.
One
Right now,
property
he
owner,
doesn't
one
have a
vote,
voice.
doesn't matter about the size of your property.
Right now he doesn't have a voice.
No, he does, because he's a property owner.
Oh, but
Because the other portion of Kennedy Place, the portion that's east of the Still River is
that's
part of
in
the
already?
district.
Oh, okay.
This is just sort of rounding out that whole undeveloped parcel.
Okay.
And it's also is an outgrowth of a discussion on city center and city hall levels about the need to expand capacity, the capacity of city center. You know, Tom mentioned we really do run really lean. I'm very fortunate to have an assistant who is just as passionate about downtown development as I am. And so we've been able to work together and really do a lot with what we have, with what little we have. And Mr. Bertram, since March, has been on our board of commissioners. And I think for him, it's also a gesture of wanting to move the development of downtown forward.
Thank you.
And if I could add too, I think it's also as far as from a developer's perspective, the taxing overlay of a DSSD does have benefits because there is again an entity that is coordinating the interests of the many, and it's just it can be a very effective vehicle for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Les Minter. Am I correct in assuming that that initial ordinance of 1987 did not include a mechanism for adjusting the borders? Is that pretty much what you took, and now you're going back and sort of figuring out, re-engineering it to make the change?
Yeah, we had to make, through the chair, we had to make a determination because there was silence in both the adopted ordinance and the statute, which, and that could help Mr. Nero's question too. The statute in its language helps in why the district is formed and how beneficial the members are to them. Neither the ordinance nor the statute specified anything, which surprised me because the statute has some, extensive provisions. So anyway, we had to sort of look at it and see what made sense, and what made sense was to take the Schedule A, which was adopted, the property description in 1987, and determine that the only way to do it would be to ask the district to come to the council to amend the ordinance by amending that schedule. And that would do the job in the absence of any. The other option, I think I mentioned in the note to Andrea and to others involved, was through some more formal procedure, which would take more time.
Dissolving it and then reestablishing it?
More steps, and that simply was not the best way. So this is probably the best, cleanest, appropriate way to do it, and everybody will see what was done and how easily.
Thanks. I have a comment. I'm just listening to Councilman Nero and Councilman Cabo about benefits and things like that. It almost seems kind of silly having this discussion when it is the property owner himself who is petitioning to expand the border to include his property. However, Danbury's been here since 16 whenever, and the Bertram family will probably not own that parcel in 400 years, or perhaps even 25. You just don't know. So there is some concern on the council's point of view that whatever we do to expand that district does not unduly burden the next purchaser of that property. If we are looking at a concrete slab now of a certain value, I can only imagine what 583 $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 condominium units are going to add to that assessment. I don't know if this project will come to fruition, or if it does, what type of project it's going to be. Will there be rental units? Will there be condominium units? If they're condominium units, will there be association fees as well as City of Danbury taxes, as well as downtown special district taxes? Will this affect the sale potential of those units? So these are things I think the council has a fiduciary duty to the citizens of Danbury, the greater citizens of Danbury too, to investigate. And I think that Councilman Nero's questions were appropriate, and it's something that I'm going to need to think about going forward. Yes, it's clearly beneficial for the downtown district. It's clearly something desired by the property owner himself, but looking down the road, if something is built on that property, perhaps even if that project does not come to fruition and the city takes title to that property, I would have a question to the Corporation Council: what would happen if the city picked up that property? You know, we need a new fire station, and for years that parcel was bandied about as a potential combined public service area for police and fire. Well, obviously not in the market to build a new police station, but I could see at some point a school going in there or something like that if the Bertram family does not move forward. And if that is then in this special district, do we have to go back to the council and redraw the line? Okay. So these are things I need to think about, and I don't know where I am on this, but I mean, on the surface, it seems like a really easy decision. You have a property owner who's got a property who wants to be included, so let's just do it. On the other hand, I think there may be some issues down the road that need to be thought about. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I could, I think there is, and I have to look at this extensive ordinance, I think there's a provision in the ordinance which allows, if a property becomes a tax-exempt property, I believe it allows by operation of law a withdrawal, again by operation. I believe that exists there. So in the case of the scenario you mentioned, you may have...
If it's got a zero assessment, then probably it'll have a zero assessment.
Other than that, I think we'd have to examine, how someone would extract themselves from that.
How much taxes does the library pay?
Zero.
Thank you.
But how much taxes would a condominium owner pay? I mean, if that becomes a condominium and I'm paying, I mean, Lake Place condos are like $6,000 a year.
Well, we have over 1,000 dwelling units in the downtown.
Residential units already. Yeah.
Residential.
Yeah, but rentals or condominiums?
Well, whether it's rentals or not.
Well, no, I mean,
if it's rentals, it's going to be passed on
well,
to some degree.
The virtue of the owners at that point would pay, but if I own a condominium downtown and I'm in the tax district, am I paying association fees, Danbury taxes, and special downtown district taxes?
And water and sewer taxes, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, am I doing this? Are you guys going to assess
Well,
my
I think Andrew
condominium?
might be able to answer that. Andrew, go ahead.
I would say it would follow what's already in existence. There are condominiums on Foster Street. There are residents, Fountain Street is part of our district, as well as Liberty Street. And they do pay.
They do
pay.
The individual owners are assessed?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will say that before, because our budget has increased incrementally over the last 4 years, we're sensitive to the property owners paying these additional taxes. And so I will sort of do a polling and see what the impact is if we raise the mill rate. Our mill rate is not the highest it's been in the past. There have been higher mill rates assessed in previous times. And to a condominium owner, maybe, it might be $120, something
Per year?
like that. Yeah.
Does that come with a vote? Do they get to vote?
Yeah, it does.
All right, good, thank you.
They have an equal vote as Dan Bertram does.
Yeah, I know, is that amazing?
That's what's good about it.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's like the General Assembly.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been talking about voluntary inclusion into the district so far. I was wondering if you all have any plans on expanding the borders of the zone as it is now to make it larger, or do you feel that it encompasses enough of the downtown area as it is?
At this point in time, we have no intention of expanding
Not from
the
a city center
district, no.
Thanks.
No, because you would run into the problem where you would have to poll property owners and they have to say, yes, we want to be included. You can't just force somebody to be included in the district.
And no plans for that? Thank you.
See, the mayor just joined us at 6:45. Any comments from the mayor?
No, we wholeheartedly support this initiative. We're trying to marry up a lot of things to the downtown revitalization zone, and everybody's amenable to moving forward with this. So I want to congratulate Andrea and Tom and everybody that's been working hard on this.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir, Mr. Dwight.
And this is to address some of your thoughts, Paul. What we're talking about in the long run is economic development for the downtown. I've operated businesses in downtown for 20 years, and I always look around and I say, of the larger style restaurants, why am I the only restaurant in downtown? And it's because there's not a lot to feed off of. So anything that we can do to bolster what City Center does and what the city does in relation to economic development is going to benefit everybody that's downtown. Because, downtown is just a revolving door of businesses at some point in time, and it's not a healthy environment. So if that becomes a school, does that do anything for economic development? Not really. If they do build 500 units there, will that do something for economic development? Absolutely.